slide.
Slides, if we want to turn the lights on, we can.
Okay, so you want to, you can kill your hotspot, and this is bad. We'll get rid of, turn that off so it's not in your face. And we'll do that. And go ahead.
Okay.
Did somebody get? Did somebody just go out?
We can turn the light on, right?
Yeah. All right.
There you go.
Yep. Okay. Great. Excellent. Hello. Oh. All right. Thank you, everyone who has spoken, for all the information and expertise. I am not here before you as an expert. So some of you I know from the whole glide path process when I did come and make energy exciting. That's something I'm an expert in. What I'm going to talk about tonight is something that I am really newly researching and promoting. So I'm thinking of my portion of tonight as really trying to just expand our imaginations about what's possible here. So some of you know that I've recently started writing a blog called Commonwealth Hudson Valley, where I'm looking at a growing approach to economic development around the country that's sometimes called community wealth building. And it's the question of how we can make sure that when we develop anything from businesses to assets like this, the community as a whole benefits. And so let me contrast that with our usual approach to development. We have a controversial development project in the city of Kingston right now, and sitting at a hearing about that, I heard a number of people express the view that, you know, it's been a long time since such a good project has come along in Kingston. We don't want to be too boisterous. We don't want to complain too much because we don't want to scare these developers away. And as if, you know, we were waiting for a Prince Charming to come and save us, and now that he's here, we want to make sure that he doesn't go away without saving us. And so I'm calling this now the developer charming model of economic development. And so when we look at a mess like this, and I appreciate Laura for using the word bummer, because I walked away from that meeting with Dennis Doyle not able to think of a way to describe it that didn't involve obscenities and superlatives.
Well, that was the one I came up with.
Especially in a situation like this, there's this thinking of like, okay, what do we got to do to get to the point where we can attract a developer to come and save us? And that is indeed how we do most of our economic development, and that may well be what happens here. And all the tools that Jennifer just presented about how we do the zoning and how we do the upfront community-driven planning to shape what we want that developer charming to do when they arrive is really important.
Wait, I would like to say that you don't have to redevelop a site so that there's one developer.
Yes.
And that's a very key point.
That may be a much better approach.
There's a very subdivided, more fine-grained approach that is probably more appropriate for the times.
Right.
So.
And one thing that's not clear to me coming out of that meeting with Dennis is how patient and flexible the county feels about who's going to be holding the site as a whole until something like that happens. And so that's one of the big question marks in my mind is the original plan was to have a single developer, Ginsburg, take this over and implement all of this, make this all happen. And I just don't want to see us in a position where we're counting on finding another one and hoping this one isn't crazy and can actually get something done. And that was kind of the impression that I got of what the sort of default approach is. So I want to just give you some perspectives about things that are happening elsewhere in the country, which may or may not be applicable here. And they range from, you know, the simple approach that is taken in a number of places where there are industrial parks or sites like this that are indeed owned by the city or owned by the county, and the county is that holding, or the city government is that entity that performs that holding company function until they get to the point where somebody comes and makes use of a particular parcel. It's not necessary that one developer come and buy the whole thing and then become the person who parcels it out for the kind of development you want to see. I didn't get the impression in talking with Dennis Doyle that that was something the county had a particular appetite for, but given all the complexities of the site, something like that may be appropriate. Another thing that's very common is that a purpose-built nonprofit or development authority is created to perform that function. And so that's something that could happen here. So a lot of cities have nonprofit economic development corporations or quasi-governmental entities like a development authority that manage an asset like this, and then may either sell pieces of it out or lease pieces of it or participate in the development process. When it comes to developing individual businesses on the site, an approach that's gaining a lot of traction in different parts of the country is what's called an anchor-led model of development, where we look to create businesses that serve major purchasers in town, be that the hospitals, be that the schools, be that the local governments. So a place where a lot of this is being done is in Cleveland, where the Cleveland hospitals and Case Western and the Cleveland Foundation got together about 10 years ago and said, you know, we're located in neighborhoods that are absolutely devastated. The hospitals deal with all of the health conditions that are caused by poverty in their immediate neighborhood. And, you know, what are we going to do to try to alleviate some of those conditions in the neighborhoods where we are? And what they decided to do, rather than try to attract a developer charming to come in and locate a business, was that they created 3 worker-owned cooperatives to serve the hospitals and schools' needs. They created a greenhouse that supplies greens to the schools and the hospitals. They created a laundry that does all the laundry for several of the hospitals. And they created a solar and LED lights company. And these 3 cooperatives now employ several hundred people, and because they're cooperatives, those people who work there, many of whom are formerly incarcerated people who didn't have work histories, are now part owners of those companies, because everybody who is an employee can buy in as an owner after they've been there 6 months or a year. And so they're building real wealth in the community where they're located. And you can create a cooperative without an anchor institution to buy from you, but it's certainly easier to create a large one if you have a big market that's ready-made. That's something that could be located on this site. You know, we could be growing greens in a greenhouse on this site. We could have a laundry on this site. You know, we have institutions like that whose purchasing power could be mobilized as part of the business development that's done here.
So I just wanted to say, as long as 12 years ago, Ulster County created an economic development plan that looked at what were the anchor, so to speak, industries that were really, and they still are the anchor industries, agricultural and value-added food, tourism, and hopefully tourism that's owner-driven, so that it's not mass tourism that's minimum wage jobs only. You know, that sort of the bed making and the sort of thing that that is not about owning a small business that can have ripple effects throughout the community because it's owner driven rather than sort of corporate tourism. Solar was another one, and I'm trying to remember what the last one was. I think it was creative industries. We have a lot of people here who are doing work from home, that are doing very creatively driven work. And I think those are still really the 4 categories. Nothing has changed. What is very clear about Ulster County that is problematic in relation to these ideas, and it doesn't mean it can't happen, is that it's very diffuse. There isn't, besides SUNY and some of the agricultural activities and some of the tourism activities, it's really not in one place. And there isn't one big buyer. Even healthcare is not as big here as it might be further south. Although Westchester Medical has sort of taken care of that in some way. And they are promising, in a sense, to take over certain parts of things. But
Right, so-
we don't have the same degree of power, purchasing power, that a city like Cleveland might have. So how would you address that?
Well, the anchor-led strategy is to look at what are the anchor institutions, meaning those institutions that are rooted in place, that aren't going to pick up and leave and go someplace else. So that is your schools and your hospitals and your governments and other big players like that, to look at what they are purchasing right now and where they're spending those dollars. And the majority of those dollars are probably being spent on businesses that either are elsewhere or are owned elsewhere. And so that's just one ingredient. You know, by itself, that doesn't make something happen, but that is one ingredient in developing a strategy to develop businesses that can be then rooted here. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. You finish your point.
I'm done with that one. I got one more to tell you about, but happy to take a question.
It was more of a comment. Why don't you finish?
Yeah, let me finish and we'll take comments, but if there's a question about this.
Just about the anchor problem?
Yeah.
Well, the problem I see with that is Cleveland has a population of 383,000 people. So to talk about something that they're doing in Cleveland and try to transfer that to Ulster, the town of Ulster, or even the city of Kingston, the scale is just vastly different.
Well, no, that's certainly true. It's something that's being studied all around the country. And, you know, the closest place I'm aware of where it's actively being replicated is in Springfield, which is larger, Springfield, Massachusetts, which again is larger than Ulster County, but, you know, closer to us in scale than Cleveland. The point is not that this is by itself a strategy that's going to use this entire site, but that it can be an ingredient in the process.
Right, and actually, go ahead. No, actually, just one thing about this. We exist in our own scale, and these buyers for our scale are large. So I think that's the point. It's not about whether a model is exactly replicated, but whether the model can be adapted. And certainly, if you have large buyers like this, they could be buying more locally. They could be developing policies to share contracts for these cooperatives and so on. Right?
Right.
I just want to say how important it is to introduce the concept of employee-owned businesses into our thinking. And, you know, that's what the value of Cleveland is. It's not about the scale. It's a different model of doing business.
Right, exactly. So it's a way of thinking about how our assets and our needs come together in a coherent way, rather than trying to attract somebody from the outside who has an idea about what they want to do, and we try to get them to do it here. It's to say, here's our workforce, here's what we're already purchasing. Let's think about these together. You know, this site is an incredible asset. I mean, we did come out from Dennis Doyle with the bummer, right? And the fact that between the asbestos and the taxes and the underground contamination, the liabilities are about 4 times what the site is currently worth. But I mean, think about it. Where is there such good road connectivity? I mean, you get right on this freeway, you're right in the business district, the railroad. I don't know if there's something that can be done with this power system or not, but I mean, it's an incredible asset, and it's one that we shouldn't be approaching as, let's get this off our hands and into somebody else's as fast as possible. Right. You know, there are ways to think about this in a way that the community can really benefit from this asset as it grows in value when these issues are finally cleaned up. So I'm just going to introduce a third strategy that is more recent, but I'm pretty excited about. I just came back from a conference in Detroit that was all about how we can create ways to invest so that individuals can invest directly in the local economy. So since the 1933 securities law that created the Securities and Exchange Commission, the right to invest directly in businesses has been divided between super rich people, who they call accredited investors, and everybody else. And there are types of investments directly in businesses that you can only make and people with business plans can only solicit if you have assets of more than $10 million or you make more than $300,000 a year. I forget what the numbers are, but basically it's about 3% of the population that can participate in these things, and the rest of us can't. And there's a whole movement right now to open up ways to actually make it more possible for ordinary people to make small investments in local businesses, to invest portions of their retirement funds in the economy that they care about the most, rather than in companies on Wall Street. And it's both recent law changes that allow so-called crowdfunding sites now to offer investment opportunities, not just GoFundMe type campaigns, and ways to develop local investment funds. So we can imagine ways in which, either at the level of an individual business and an individual parcel on this site, or maybe even the site as a whole, creating funds that local people with varying scales of wealth, from very small to very large, could invest in, creating businesses here and redeveloping the site in ways that directly address things that the community cares about. So I haven't told you enough about any of these three strategies to make it actionable. In the spirit of tonight, this is just putting some possibilities on the table, but I'm really just trying to open up our thinking even further than what Jennifer suggested, which absolutely is the groundwork in terms of, let's get our zoning and our comprehensive planning and our community design in place so that we're shaping it. But beyond that, there's even more we can think about in terms of how can we use this asset to really benefit the community.
I also want to point out that comprehensive planning can include all of those strategies. It isn't limited to only looking at land use. Land use should be the manifestation of the thinking. And if the thinking is about more of a community wealth-oriented approach, an small business owner, locally owned business, then that should make its way into the way land is used. Land use is not the answer. It is the result of the thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Andy?
I just want to add a couple things. I absolutely agree with the strategies that you've laid out. And the thing is that we do have tools here already that will enable the community to respond to those things, including the updating of master plans and zoning ordinances and community engagement in planning. But community development corporations are a powerful, powerful thing. And they're easily chartered, and RUPCO is already a community development corporation. And the next step is to have a community development financial institution that runs out of that, so that you're not going to Bank of America or the big banks to finance these things. This money comes from the community, comes from community investment into the financial institution, and there's good return. You get good interest from your investment in a CDFI. The other thing is we do have examples that are closer by. In central New Jersey, a community-driven plan for the Bell Labs complex, which was huge. No one developer was going to take that on. And that's what for 10 years, that's what they hoped would happen, until somebody finally said, this is crazy. We know what the traffic is going to be like. We know that this is going to be just a miserable place to live if something really large happens here. So they broke it down into community groups and committees and design charrettes, and they came out with something that is not perfect, but suits the site, suits the town, and serves the region. and provides jobs in a unique setting. And there's a private development in Kearney, New Jersey called Kearney Point, and that's an old shipyard that's being completely redeveloped as adaptive reuse for all kinds of things. And they're involving flood control strategies, contamination cleanup strategies, and the use of older buildings for retrofit as opposed to tearing things down that still have a useful life. And so we don't have to go so far away to look at examples.
Those are great examples. I didn't know about the Bell Labs site, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And I think that Rocco has explored becoming or setting up a community development and financial institution. And really what that does is it's almost like it creates a revolving loan fund where it gets replenished. We also do have a revolving loan fund in the city of Kingston. But it is true that all of these instruments that we're talking about require individuals who have the capacity to manage those very complex administrative processes, and I don't think it means we can't do it. I just think it means that we need to identify which one is going to be catalytic for the next one, and attracting the talent or finding that talent here and figuring out a way to make that happen. I think these are all great ideas, and as you say, the appetite of the mothership shouldn't be the only reason why we can or cannot do it. So I think that's part of what we all want to imagine together, and we think that we did this, I think, very well in Kingston. Kingston Citizens, which was one of the, I guess you could say, a community-driven, whatever you think of it, it was a community-driven organization of many people constantly coming together, pulling apart, coming back together to advocate for what they wanted to see. And the first thing they wanted to see in their community was political transparency and civic engagement. Each community will come together for its own goals. And I think that here, Tech City represents an amazing opportunity, and if there is an appetite in the ground, it doesn't have to be, in the air, 30,000 feet up, and having them enable. And that's what I was saying at the beginning, is if there is a push for this, regardless of where they are in their negotiations, the political will find the way. New people will get into office. That's how Kingston began to change, because we got a whole new common council as a result of people getting activated. So I think that it's really in your hands. That's the point I think we're here to talk about, right? That if you want to be part of this, you can come together in groups and start strategizing with us.
So when's our first class on municipal law, section 10?
Yeah.
I'll be here.
So, I mean, what you said, Jennifer, is so right on, and that's what Town of Ulster Citizens, that's why we started, was we saw a problem, and we have been together for 1.5 years now, and now we're into doing something else. This has such great potential, and there's so many different facets. If we can find some solutions that we can really help this town and the whole county. And I mean, there are jobs that are needed. I've been going door to door for 2 years, and I hear all the time that, oh, well, my kids have left because we don't have jobs here, or, people that are my age who have sold their homes because they've retired and now they can't afford the taxes. And, that's not the story that we want to see here. We want people to thrive. I just bought a home. So I want to be able to afford it, in 10, 15, 20 years. 30 years, I'm stuck now. So this is so important, and the moment is now because of what's happening with the potential foreclosures at this property. And it's our time to move. And it's been sitting for, what, 15, 20 years where government hasn't done anything for a variety of reasons. And I'm not gonna lay blame at anybody's feet. We've all heard what the issues are. There's no easy solution. But I fully believe that with civilian participation, with us citizens, that we can make a great difference here. And it would be so, I mean, just that one picture that Jennifer put up with buildings there, all that color, I mean, that's just so exciting if we could really make something happen there. And I fully believe that our participation and our input and our hard work, because we saw that with Glide Path, that was our sweat, our pencils that were going all the time. We really achieved that. So we've done it once, I think we can do it again. And we have incredible help here, who I believe are gonna stay with this, hopefully. And you've imparted so much great information to us, thank you. And now, I think if there's certain areas that we should look at, and this is for you three, of where we could possibly get people to volunteer, because that's what we need. That's where the four of us stumbled in putting this together. There's so much to look at, to prepare to get to this next step, and we need more hands in the pot and researchers to delve into some of the areas that they've talked about here tonight, right?
Yeah, it's like you're at a proselytizing meeting here, trying to convert you.
Well, I think this is a bit bigger than the townofcitizens.org, and I think that the townofcitizens.org could invite other citizens of Ulster County to help.
Sure.
Well, let's just do that right now. Who here lives in the town of Ulster? And now who's outside of the town of Ulster? So it's about almost pretty much half and half. So I mean, that's very exciting to see all of you that are coming here, that are in different parts of the county.
By the way, the school district in Kingston stands to suffer as a result of all of this financial peril as well. So
That's right.
I think you're very right. We are all affected by this. And I don't think it really matters whether you live in Ulster or not. Tech City and the malls and the lack of revenue and the dropping of the tax base is something that's going to affect and has affected all of Ulster County for 30
and
years.
I think that this should be an Ulster County project to serve Ulster County. You know, we as Ulster County citizens owe it to ourselves to make this a project that serves our people in our county.
Mama, and then Alona.
I wanted to follow up with what Evelyn was talking about, and that is something that I suggested publicly. One of the needs that this county has, that this region has, is to find businesses that will take the recyclables that we all generate and make them into products.
Right.
We can't depend on China. A principle of sustainability is local self-reliance. And there are companies that are taking the clamshells that nobody else wants and figuring out how to make product out of it. And our economic development office and the folks that give out pilots, I don't think have adequately incentivized that kind of industry. And if we can attract that kind of industry, we not only solve our problem, but there would be surrounding communities and others that would take advantage of a local and regional processing capability. I served as the recycling coordinator in Ulster County for 10 years, and we marketed all our materials locally and regionally. One exception went to you know, the South and came back with product fully loaded, backhauled. So it can be done. It's gotten very sloppy, and we've relied on being able to dump our material onto shipping containers and send it halfway across the world. It doesn't make sense. So I just, in terms of meeting a need, and that anchor model that you were talking about, that need is clear. And this site, it seems like at least some of this site could be used for that purpose. It's not there somewhere nearby. Thank you for letting me share that.
And then you.
So when I said I'm going to come to a class, I'm not joking. I've been reading comprehensive plans mainly because of the education that I've gotten. I've been slogging through code. I've been slogging through comprehensive plans. I've been slogging through
I'm sorry.
No. The point is, I think many more of us should know how to do it. And I'm still driving myself crazy with the New York State website. I think we need you to give us a class. I wasn't joking. The other thing I need, and I think I would love it if we set a time right now tonight for a class on exactly what you're talking about. And I'm not that I want to finish. The other thing, which touches on what Nana said, there's always this notion of bringing in either developer charmings or business charmings or something else, but we need to do this here. So then there's always a talk about, the workforce isn't educated enough. Hey, you know what? Why do we have to spend money to go, why do people who are senior citizens like me, why would we have to spend money at BOCES or go to SUNY Ulster? Why isn't there some kind of an incubator, but not only an incubator with education? I come up with ideas that are, really a lot of them are cockamamie, but some of them are very good. Some of them, no. I've come up with tech ideas that I knew I couldn't execute, and someone else executed them afterwards, and they were making millions of dollars. So why don't we have some kind of educational, some kind of teacher group who's willing to teach for free? Old people like me and not old people who have ideas, how to bring them to market, how to make something happen. I would love to make some kind of pavement that water can go through. So what's out there? What kind of chemistry do I need? I mean, there are a million ideas that we could have, like Nana's idea. Why don't we have some kind of mastermind groups with teachers, with professors who are real scientists to help us through this?
Actually,
It's a good $4,000 question. Yeah.
actually, the Greenville Central School District is trying to develop a high school / business incubator model, which was very interesting because the high schools legally don't have the right to own any technology that's developed by the company. Most business incubators are spin-off ideas that come out of college or university, and they do have the right to own that technology, and they hold companies because of that. So this kind of red model on basically the companies, if they succeed, they can generate a share revenue stream back to the school districts. And if you model that, one of the surprising things that come out of it is if you have enough successful companies, they take more school back to the school.
We get back to Tech City, right? Because that's more like education and what we need for education. For Tech City, we need to figure out how to change the codes so that way we can bring in the right things. I think what we need to do is find a way to reach out to the community, because the great thing about Tech City is it's so close that a lot of the Midtown people who need good jobs so they can afford their houses, so they don't lose their apartments when people buy something.
Suffering so much,
They
depending on you.
can walk to more jobs. Like if the mall strip was to double in size, I don't know if we can support that, but it would bring in more jobs and then affordable.
Could I just try to answer Laura's question for a quick?
Yeah, and there's someone back there with a question too, so we've been stepping over him, so.
The notion of asset-based development, as the gentle lady spoke to, is great, and likewise the notions that Amanda Joe mentioned. And to think in terms of assets and full ecological value in terms of Tech City. And how much carbon is already sequestered and already liberated in the concrete that sits in piles. And if we start to think of those as assets and how they get reused, how, as one person mentioned, the remediation of the site occurs. There's really, with an intent to maximize value and achieve equity and fairness in the approach, to bring parties together, not cast aspersions at the current owners, but bring them into this. Multiple parties collaborating and trying to figure out innovative, equitable ways to create community-based economic development is really a fascinating opportunity at this location.
I wanted to just speak to what Mona said. I wish we could, what we are, do that. And I think the way that we are doing it is exactly through this growing network of interconnected, I mean, you know, I know I'm not the only person who knows many people in this room, right? This is a very intensely social county, and we do have a lot of informal classrooms in the sense that we're doing this on a regular basis together. How that becomes part of one greater environment in which teachers step up and students join in and then they teach others and so on, I think that's maybe for someone more smarter than us to do, but for the time being we are doing that in a way, kind of clustering together and learning and working together, or you wouldn't already be a convert and reading the most boring website in the world. I'm sorry, the state's, land use law, library. So, but what I was going to suggest is what we came here tonight to do was to see who would be willing to sort of step up and sit in a group of strategy-oriented people, whether it's with Pat for one thing, and Evelyn for another, and Laura for another, and me for another. Just sit down in a meeting and get some ideas on paper, and then come back together as a group and see where that can take us as a strategy would go. What are some talking points? What are some key next steps? And how do we appeal to those who have the political will or should have the political will to move forward on several fronts? Because it's not just one thing, right? Absolutely. Andy?
I just want to say that the one thing, although I heard the word carbon mentioned now, is that we have to remember that whatever happens on this site is going to happen for the next 100 years. And in the next 100 years, dire things are going to happen to our world. So one of the things we have to do is have a strategy that allows us to redevelop the site in such a way that provides a softer landing rather than a harder landing. So looking at enterprises and businesses that are also looking at ways of mitigating the climate crisis and preventing a crisis in the first place, or at least ameliorating where crisis is likely to happen. And that has to be part of all planning. You can't do regular planning anymore.
And TSEC thought they were doing that when they attracted a number of solar businesses here, but the conditions weren't right for them to stay. And so maybe the timing wasn't right, or the agreements weren't right. I'm not sure what the reasons were, but they all dispersed, right?
Well, one huge reason is that it doesn't take 100 people to make solar panels. It took about 20. Yeah, that was a big disappointment.
But that's not the only thing. I mean, there are cooperatives in New York City now that are building electric assist bicycles and trikes for delivering cargo from place to place that are entry-level jobs that wind up training people for very skilled jobs. And then there are opportunities once those businesses that use those things. So that's what I'm talking about, is taking a lower tech approach instead of, like this idea that you have to fill a space with high-tech stuff.
Totally.
And I'm not going to go any further.
Well, and Farmbridge is an example of that. Farmbridge, it's processing good old-fashioned agricultural products. It's not high-tech there. So I think Evelyn's point there is that it is going to be a multitude of different things, and it's not one silver bullet.
Evelyn, I'll work with you.
So I want to just ask a question at this point. Who, just in general, would volunteer some time to work on this? Okay, so we have some hands. So now, Pat, if you were to head up something, let's divide this into areas so that we could get people to perhaps be more specific where your skill set might be most useful. So Pat, what would you?
The environmental issues.
The environmental issues, Jennifer?
Land use and law.
The economic.
And the economic. Fred, I'd love for you to work with Evelyn.
So what we could do is actually break into corners for 5 or 10 minutes and see if we could set up meetings.
Yeah.
And
then what I would like to do is, we need help to get this word out, and so we need help in communicating the media relations of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing that solely, and we need more. So anybody in that department.
Right, so you have the communications and advocacy.
Yeah.
Before you break up into different groups, I mean, I think the environmental issues, a lot of people are very concerned about the environmental issues, but tonight I heard that the environmental issue is contained to a shallow, sandy location that has a solid stone ridge on one side, right? And if you were to focus that site, that would be the parking lot. That's just like pouring concrete over Chernobyl. It would be fine. The environmental issue would be remediated, not remediated, but sustained slowly.
Well, that's only a part of it, because you've also got the asbestos on the west side, and we've got that asbestos pile. So it isn't simple, while yes, it could be remediated further by planning around it, yes.
But so the only reason why I started with environmental is because then the question is, from the laws and the zoning aspect, what can we do? I think we need to come up with a plan. Like what's the easiest win? What's the low hanging fruit, right? And then what can we move on to after that? And then that builds momentum.
Although I would say for the environmental one, there are a number of different things to be explored, whether it's proposals like MANAs, or renewables, or what kind of specific incentives like BOA. There are a whole, like a smorgasbord of environmental issues that if you're interested in that Pat is knowledgeable on all of those, right? I don't want to speak for Pat, but
Yeah, no, that would be fine.
When I think of Tech City, and I came here thinking of Tech City, I think of that whole parcel. I just don't want to concentrate on those contaminated 40 or 50 acres.
right, that's why
That's right.
I want to include the entire west side.
That's why I asked that question. So what my group would do is we would look at the whole parcel, we would understand what are the conditions, where are the wetlands and where does it flood and where are the roads and all those things, and we'll do a real planning exercise. It's fun, but I don't want to distract those of you who are interested in other things. And then we will look at what the laws are currently and how we could advocate, what we would need to do to advocate for change. And then we'd come together with the other groups and what they're talking about so we can have a bigger discussion.
Yeah, and this is not to say that this, and I see you too, I'm not ignoring you. And this is not to say we're going to stay separated and work individually and that's how it's going to be. We have to dig into these areas separately before we can come together, so that we're armed with all of this information to put the pieces together.
And so
Because-
manageable size groups too.
Right. So, Bob?
You kind of got the cart before the horse here. IBM is the sole responsibility, the liability. You can't do anything without IBM's approval there.
That's right.
And that's for 100 years.
Yes.
We have plenty of time.
We talked about that earlier.
But that's how it is.
Right.
And no insurance company, no company is gonna go in there, because if they do, IBM says, well, here's the liability, this goes with it. Nobody in their right mind.
But that's gonna go part of the environmental piece to look at that. We're aware of that. We talked about that earlier when Pat did her presentation, so.
We worked there, and I can tell you right now, that was built for the military.
Yeah, we went through all that, Bob. Yeah, we went through all that.
Yeah. So
That
Jeff?
ground over there, if you dig it up, you can throw a match on the ground.
Right. Yeah, we went through all of that earlier in the session.
Well, then, why are you doing this other stuff? Because the liability is still with IBM. And if they don't approve it, the only way IBM will do it is if you, the town, or the county, or the state, or somebody else that's lost their mind, would,
But that's the whole point of sitting with Pat, who works in that area, and try to come up and find a way to work around it or work with it. So anyone who's interested in that should go and talk with Pat. Jeff?
I think I'm kind of saying the same thing, so I have to get in.
Bob?
Is that it seems like there needs to be a committee to look at the political implications of getting this property, so we can do something with it. And that seems to be the first step, is getting control of it and getting the ability to do everything else we've talked about here. And that's not just environmental, that's part of it. It's also a political thing.
It's about the bankruptcy procedure.
It's a bankruptcy procedure, it's the who is going to take control of this, whether it's the town or the county or the state.
And that's something we can't answer at this point. That's one thing that Dennis, we talked about with Dennis Doyle. We're doing this in the meantime because that's going to be unfolding over the next several months, because we don't have those answers yet. So what we want to do is to work on these specific issues in the meantime, so that when we see what happens, that's why we stopped the reimagining, the charrette.
I understand. So I guess I'm saying is there a group that needs to be created in this group here to follow that process and understand that process, and maybe can drive that process?
Yes, but the political folk that we want to talk to aren't quite ready to talk to us.
Okay.
And so it's just a fact. You know, we have a new county executive. He's learning, and he, from his vantage point, he can't say too much because he's going to be in litigation. So that's.
I think as part of this, we can set up a set of files. Let's say they're Google Docs, where we put down what we know and what we know we can't control. And that's a placeholder. There's a placeholder for that, as you said. And we should put the facts down so that the public knows what they are and what we're waiting on and what are the conditions. And like I said, we can't change, but we can still work around that.
But I guess I'm not sure we can change it. You talked about political activism. So there's so if there's political activism, we need to know what it is we need to be active doing. So I think there's a political part here.
Very definitely. So just consider for a moment, it's been a little dizzying in the last couple of days. We went to the county and the county said, it's hell in a handbasket, there's nothing to be done. This gentleman who had to leave, Tom Candace, worked for Tech City, and he's telling us that the contamination is not as bad as it appears to be. And so that is a political process, right? But it's also about talking to the DEC and getting them to perhaps change the way they view the site.
Right.
So that's a piece of it that I would say comes under environmental.
Okay, and if what you want to do encompasses that,
It does, yeah.
I'd love to work with you on that.
Politics is in everything.
Yeah.
And I think there's broadly speaking, two possible routes here. One is that, you know, the developer charming or multiple developer charming's routes. And the other is we're actually able to, through some kind of public-private, community-controlled entity, take possession of the site and really direct its development. Either way, we need to do the work that these folks are talking about in terms of the understanding everything about the environmental, understanding the site conditions, and doing the planning work. And then I think part of the economic piece is what are the possibilities for that second and more appealing route?
I understand that. I'm just saying that until we know what the scenario is gonna be. I mean, if someone does come along, comes along, buys the whole thing up and has $1 billion, decides to develop their own way.
No, but it doesn't have to be that way, and I think that's the point that Evelyn was trying to make. There are multiple routes. When I was, it took 30 years to happen, but my first internship in planning was at Battery Park City Authority, where it was all one mega site, and no one was going to develop that. It was impossible. 92 acres. This is bigger, right? But still, similar scale. They had to break it into multiple plots, multiple parcels, in order for it to be accessible for not even the average investor, but any kind of developer. That's the point here, that we have to look at a solution and we have to push the political will in the direction of something that is more feasible, rather than throwing up our hands and saying, we have to wait for them to come up with a solution. And I think that's really why we're here tonight.
We've got
And
to
another
work
thing
both
is too,
routes.
is if the developer came in and wanted that, well, guess what? They have to listen to the public
I
too.
understand that, but I'm
Right?
saying
Yeah.
that's.
Right.
we need to be-
So I think we're here just to explore that, and I've seen miracles, difficult miracles occur through the work of Kingston citizens, because it took a whole group of people, attracting more and more people into sort of a coalition approach to even advocate for change. And it was successful, it has been successful. And I think you're successful for the same reason, because you're obviously getting people into a room who are very smart and who want to work together. That's really how it happens.
Democracy.
I
You
think
can elect
it's-
some new council people too.
What was that?
I said you can elect some new council people.
That's
right.
Laura. And then you.
That's right, Dan.
And then you will be running for office soon.
I am running for office.
Okay.
With Laura.
That's the offshoot of the work that we've done, that now Dan and I want to be on the town board in the town of Ulster.
Right.
So, we can really put, walk the talk, or talk the walk, or both. And actually, when these things come up, and that's a large part of, I want to hear what the citizens want. So when it comes time to, I want to be ready and armed and push this forward.
So I hear you guys saying you want to break into groups tonight.
Yes.
I think that maybe since we're half an hour over and we've
Yes.
lost
Exactly.
like half the audience, we should set that for a later date.
So I think we should probably not.
So how did you all know about this? Because that's going to help me.
Facebook.
Facebook?
I think it was Facebook.
Did anybody get the email?
No.
Yeah.
There's a couple. So I hope all of you with the sheets, wherever they may be,
Did you sign up?
Where's the
that
sign-in sheet?
people will.
So we could do it one of two ways. We could go into our corners, and those of you who want to participate in a group could right now look at your calendars together and agree on a date.
Or
and
at
time.
least come and tell us that you're interested, so that we know how to go.
Yeah,
I
let's
just-
have some sign-up sheets.
I need to know where the clipboard is.
I just want to make a quick comment, which might sound really silly, but I'm a member of DPD. And so, I'm really involved. And I'm amazed at how many people I meet around the county who don't realize that the city of Kingston and the town of Ulster are actually two separate entities.
That's right.
Because it all has the same zip code.
Yeah.
My address is Kingston. I live in this neighborhood. My address is Kingston, New York.
And so moving forward as far as communications, and that's.
It's our fault too, though. Honestly, where I live, I said